Imagine we lived in a world where having a normal conversation with someone was a unique skill to possess. Okay, actually, maybe that's a bad example because I feel like we've already headed there after COVID. Nobody really knows how to have a conversation anymore. So, I'm gonna change the hypothetical. Instead, let's imagine it was the norm for people to learn how to read and write before they learned how to speak, where your ability to speak hinged on the amount of things you had memorized through reading literature. Believe it or not, this is how the music world has operated for a while now. The norm for musicians is that they learn how to read and write first, and then we completely ditch the idea of being able to play spontaneously in the moment, otherwise known as improvisation. It's always bothered me how neglected this skill has been. The idea of learning music, like any other language, has never been the most popular ideology. And why that is, I have no clue. Because it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. In any language, you gotta learn the grammatical structure, which translates to music theory, and then you gotta learn how to read and write. But the speaking element, arguably the most important aspect of learning any language, has been almost completely lost throughout the history of music. Now you may be asking how we even got to this point. If I had to answer you truthfully, I would probably have to do a ton of research to pinpoint exactly when this shift happened. But I'm gonna do you one even better. I'm gonna just give you my opinion. If you think about the earliest periods of music and how the music was made, it was all impromptu. Music made in the moment. That has always been the original tradition of this art form. Our ancestors would create the songs, and the way those songs would be passed through generations is orally. We would learn the songs by ear and pass it down to our next generation and the next, and so on and so forth. This all changed when the writing nation attacked. Or I guess it more so happened whenever civilization advanced enough where writing tools became more accessible to everybody. Still, the tradition of being able to improvise music was still very much alive. So when did this shift exactly happen? In my opinion, it was in the classical period. I have a lot to say about this period of music because I personally believe this is the era where the tradition of being able to improvise began to dwindle. And the reason why is because people started glazing too hard. You see, all the legendary composers you know and love, the Bachs, the Mozarts, the Beethovens, the Chopins, the Mahlers, the Shostakoviches of the world, they were all amazing improvisers. I'm sure you've heard of those legendary stories where Mozart improvised a whole sonata on the spot, or the legends of Bach creating a fugue with all this intricate counterpoint off the dome. And don't even get me started with Chopin, because after analyzing some of his pieces, this guy might have been one of the greatest jazz pianists ever. It's clear that being able to improvise was still an integral skill for great composers to have. So when did the shift happen? Well, these composers became legendary and everybody started playing their music. This led to less and less people who were willing to compete with the already pre-existing canon. In short, we started bouncing on it crazy style, to the point where people started competing over who could play the dead guy's piece the best. Being able to freely speak the music became less and less popular, and the ability to read and write became much more sought after skills. Eventually, the classical world became the go-to way to learn any sort of instrument, which leads us today, where the doctrine is reading and writing is more important than being able to speak. Playing classical music is very similar to acting out a play. You have to memorize your lines, you also have to remember how you're going to express those lines, and you got to put a little bit of your own sauce into the character you are playing. This is essentially what the classical doctrine has become. Act out a scene that everybody knows and loves, and you are judged based on how well you're able to execute that scene. In my opinion, this is exactly what led to the absolute ditching of the art of improvisation. Improv by nature puts you in a really vulnerable position, where you are prone to making mistakes and saying nothing of value. And the reward of potentially creating something magical in the moment was just not worth the risk. Enter jazz. I know you guys were all thinking it. This guy doesn't even know jazz exists. Chill out. Alright, let me build a video here, okay? The foundation of jazz was almost the complete opposite of classical music, which makes sense because it was a music born out of protest. This shit was about freedom, being able to say what you want to say here and now. You learn this music exactly how I think every style of music should be taught, with your ears first, learning through surrounding yourself with people who spoke the language better than you, so that you could absorb and soak in the vocabulary that was being used. It's the same way you learned how to speak when you were born. Jazz became the much needed spark to reignite the original tradition of music. Unfortunately, the fact still stands that most people learn the classical way, which leads us to having a ton of musicians who don't really know how to speak the language. So the question becomes, how do you speak? The answer is really simple. Don't think too hard about it. Treat music as you would any other language. Try to memorize some licks that you think sound really cool. Listen to people who you think sound good. Surround yourself with people who speak the language better than you, and practice speaking the language with your friends. Also, always remember to try to learn things with your ear first. If you do all these things, eventually, everything will come together. I'm willing to bet that some legendary composers will be on the rise whenever improvisation becomes a normalized skill in our community. I can tell you firsthand that improvisation helps me a ton whenever I'm making anything. So I do recommend you put some time and effort into it as well. If you like this kind of content, hit that like button, leave a comment below, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.